Let's say it plainly at the outset. Mazel tov, Mayor Mamdani. His election is being met in some quarters not with sober analysis but with a rush to brand legitimate criticism of the Israeli state as hostility to Jews. That move deserves to be unpicked carefully because it weakens the fight against real anti-Semitism and it narrows the space for democratic argument in a city with the largest Jewish community outside Israel. The record shows something awkward for his accusers. He's already condemned swastika vandalism at a Brooklyn Jewish school as disgusting and heartbreaking and promised to stand with Jewish New Yorkers to root it out. That is what an opponent of anti-Semitism sounds like. What triggered the latest wave of indignation was not a parade of slurs or conspiracies. It was Rabbi Angela Buchdal's claim that he had contributed to a mainstreaming of some of the most abhorrent anti-Semitism without identifying an act that was in fact anti-Semitic. The substance of the charge was political. Mamdani has said Israel's Gaza campaign is genocidal and has highlighted NYPD training links with Israeli security forces. Those positions are shared by major human rights organizations and by Jewish critics of the Gaza war. They may be wrong in parts, they may be overstated, they may aggravate people who love Israel, they are not in themselves hatred of Jews. To call them that is to confuse Israel with Judaism in a way many Jews themselves resist. What we're watching is a collision of two stories about Jewish safety in New York. One is voiced by large legacy bodies such as the UJA, JCRC, ADL and AJC, who issued rapid post-election warnings vowing to monitor every appointment and every policy from City Hall. Their anxiety is real. Anti-Semitic incidents have risen. A swastika on a yeshiva door the night of his victory is not an abstraction, it's a threat. Their instinct is to say that a mayor who is hostile to Zionism cannot possibly keep Jews safe. The other story is told by progressive Jewish groups and by younger Jews who backed him in surprising numbers. They heard an unapologetic Muslim candidate promise to defend synagogues, keep Commissioner Tzich, teach about Jewish Americans in the schools, and fight hate crimes while still supporting Palestinian freedom. For them, the old bargain is broken. Die-hard support for Israel is no longer the entry ticket to power in New York. You can stand with Jews against swastikas and still criticize occupation, siege, and mass killing. That is precisely the political settlement his win embodies. Why did the smear effort fail this time? Well, first, because voters could see the gap between the label and the conduct. If he were even faintly anti-Semitic, he would not have spent the campaign in synagogues, in Hasidic homes in South Williamsburg, at Israelis for peace events, publishing an open letter in Yiddish and promising higher protection for Jewish institutions. That is the behavior of a coalition builder, not a bigot. Second, because New Yorkers also carry a memory of the post-9/11 atmosphere in which Islamophobia, surveillance of Muslims, and the pairing of Muslimness with suspicion became routine, many recognized that what was being sold as Jewish protection was at least partly a rerun of that script in the Gaza context. And third, because economic pain, housing and transport were more urgent than manufactured outrage. Voters chose the candidate who spoke about rents rather than the candidate who spoke about Netanyahu. It's also worth naming the international amplification. Israeli officials from the right called this a dark day and even urged New York Jews to consider emigrating. Michael Oren said anti-Semitism had not just been normalized but popularized. That is a serious claim. Yet it sits uneasily beside the fact that the man at the center of it was condemning a swastika in Brooklyn, promising to prosecute hate and telling Jews they belong in his New York. The Israeli reaction tells us less about Mamdani and more about a political class in Jerusalem that has grown used to American urban leaders endorsing its every move. The surprise is that the pipeline of automatic deference has been interrupted. So, here is the crux of the matter. Criticism of a state is not criticism of a people. Anti-Zionism, and I use the term loosely and I'll come back to it later today possibly, is not automatically anti-Semitism. Nor is support for Palestinian self-determination a threat to Jewish life in New York. The moment you say otherwise, you arm every actual anti-Semite. You tell them that if they scrawl a swastika after a Muslim mayor wins an election, the Jewish establishment will blame the Muslim mayor rather than the person with the paint. That misdirection is dangerous. It clouds police priorities, it muddles public education, and it hands authoritarians an excuse to criminalize protest. Mamdani is right to insist that New York must be a city where you cannot weaponize Islamophobia and win. He will now have to show daily that it is also a city where you cannot weaponize anti-Semitism and win. There is another reason to welcome this result. For 2 years, campus protesters, workers and students were smeared as anti-Semites for opposing Gaza policy. City Hall, under its predecessors, often took its cue from pro-Israel business voices and sent police in accordingly. That pattern linked protest control to foreign policy preferences. Mamdani's victory breaks that link. It tells organisers that they can build a multiracial, multi-faith majority and that the old smears will not necessarily stop them. It also tells Jewish progressives that they were right to stay in the coalition instead of letting their fear be used to break it. That is politically mature. And it's good for Jewish safety because the safest place for Jews is inside a broad democratic alliance, not huddled behind a single embattled state. Now, it would be naive to pretend there's no work to do. Some of his language about the NYPD and the IDF was sharp and theatrical. Some slogans he hesitated to disavow carry freight that frightens Jewish people. He will need to explain again and again that his target is power, not people. He will need to show that any move he takes on city partnerships with Israeli institutions is driven by human rights law and not by hostility to Jewish New Yorkers. And he will need to meet the legacy organizations who mistrust him and give him the boring reassurance, and give them the boring reassurance of budgets, patrol cars, and curriculum lines. That is what governing looks like. But it is a long way from the blood libel that he is an anti-Semite. The loudest lesson in all this is that is for those who overreached. Call a socialist Muslim candidate anti-Semitic when you cannot produce an anti-Semitic act and you cheapen the word. Do it in a city that just elected him and you make yourself look out of touch. Do it while he was condemning an actual anti-Semitic crime and you look absurd. New York has just reminded its elites that Jewish safety and Palestinian solidarity are not mutually exclusive projects. That is what the vote said. That is what the mayor-elect has promised. The task now is to hold him to it without reviving a failed smear campaign. Mazel tov.